Howdy mates, good noon time. How are we all doing? It is January 2nd, 2022. And right now, I'm actually getting a bit closer to Caspersen Beach. However though, I did it quite differently. So instead of parking at Caspersen Beach, I actually parked at the Manasota Key Beach. I've actually been walking up this shoreline the entire time. Because, it actually saves a little bit on gas, too. Know what I'm saying? So, as you can see, the water is rather active today. That's just because I believe we recently had a new moon. Please correct me if you need to. Honestly, I don't always keep a full track on what stage of the moon we're at. But right now, we're actually seeing a little bit of a winter beach profile, as I've mentioned before in past videos, of course. So that's where we have a chance to really see more of the coarse sand that makes up the coastline. But I think what's particularly neat about returning back to Mother Ocean is just the fact that I haven't been here since, well, last Sunday. So I was definitely overdue for a revisit. But right now, what you're seeing in the ocean are something called barreling waves. So what happens is the crest gets high enough as to where it creates a little bit of like an opening, like right there, like where you see the lip, essentially. Wow. I tell you, the ocean has always been mesmerizing for me. She does a great job. So noticeably, as you can tell, the sand, it actually looks rather dark. Some of you may know why that is the case, but for those of you who don't, we're actually seeing a little bit of something called titanium oxide. Now, with that being said, that means there is essentially metal that is in it, hence the titanium. And that's what really gives it that dark appearance. And what's fascinating too is it's known to be one of the most dense minerals that you can find along the Gulf Coast of Florida. And they're usually the last to suspend. Suspend is just a fancy way of saying to float, just because of how dense it is. And that's why oftentimes you'll see them closest to the water. Just because, well, they're rather stubborn. They don't really like to move that much. But majority of the type of mineral that really makes up our coastline is, of course, quartz. And a major component of quartz is, as you would guess, silica. Silica is like that foundational element that makes up rocks, essentially. And you have to think, like, much of this sand, at some point, it would have had a direct connection to the Ozarks and even the Appalachian Mountains as well. So even the sand can tell us the story in terms of how it got here. But what's really fascinating to me is that a beach, even though it's constantly changing, in terms of the features and the weather, what occurs, there is one thing, though, that does remain consistent. It is called balance. And what I mean by balance is the fact that the beach always tries to find an equilibrium in terms of how much sand there is. Think of it this way, okay? Let's wait for this wash to pass. There's my footstep, right? Right there. So it's going over, and just like that, it basically diminishes. Like right there. That last footstep that I took, it's already completely gone. So that's what I'm trying to say, is the beach always tries to find a way to fill in that gap. So like, what can happen sometimes, you know, after recent storms and whatnot, you know, hurricanes and even rainstorms, mass erosion can happen, as you can see right here. I mean, we're seeing something called a dune, basically. Now, with that being said, when mass erosion happens, it's a very rapid change. Whereas, on the other hand, some beaches may have something called a scarp, which is something a bit more gradual. But there is a difference. But what happens then is, once mass erosion has occurred, once it approaches into the summer months, sand will experience something called accretion, which is just also another fancy way of saying sand accumulates. So, even though a beach constantly changes, that is the one consistent process that always happens. Wow. And by the way, these rocks were actually added here. These are not natural. These rocks were added here because it essentially slows down that erosion rate, considering that some houses are literally just past this vegetation. But this beach experiences a lot of what you call salt spray. So what happens is water can evaporate, and as a result, it creates water vapor. And, you know, the water has evaporated, so all that's left is the salt, and it acts as a grinding process too. So that's why oftentimes you'll notice when you look at, okay, say that sea grape right up there, you'll notice that the seaward side, it looks a lot more bare. But then when you go on the landward side of the sea grape, it's mostly covered. So that's another thing too. A lot of this vegetation here has a shape according to how the wind behaves. Especially if you're lucky enough to find some sand live oak. It just looks so warped. And that's just because of wind. So alright, you guys, I'm actually going to break this up into another video because there's still even more that I want to talk about that we're essentially seeing here. And Aquaman, another alter ego of mine, can share more of his interpretation. So alright, you guys, take care, enjoy your Sunday. Journey on a Journey is outwards. Take care, folks. See ya.